Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to share, in particular, what I know about Dr. Martin Luther King, but I'm going to talk about some other things too. I have some friends and allies here, and I appreciate their invitation. Melanie and Charlie and others, and folks, good to see you again. I've been here before, and I have been doing this type of thing about Dr. King in particular, and about race and class and gender and ethnicity and religion in the United States and around the world for 30 years. I started teaching when I was 20. Came out of high school a little early, so I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've taught from kindergarten to graduate school level. I've taught in Kansas City, in Hartford, Connecticut, Hartford, as they say, in New Orleans, in Grenada, West Indies. I've lived in Grenada, in the Caribbean, down by Trinidad, and I've lived in New York and Connecticut here. Kansas City most of my life. This is my home. I went to Paseo High School on the Missouri side, UMKC, KU, and the University of Connecticut. But I've been studying Dr. King, among other individuals and movements and institutions, for 30 years. I've not just read the books out about him and heard his speeches. I've probably heard over 80, 90 King speeches. I've also interviewed and met with people who knew him personally. After he became famous, as before, I've talked to people who went to college with him, down in Morehouse, etc. So I know him well. I've talked to people who marched with him and people who didn't, who criticized him because they felt he either was too radical or not radical enough. But one of the things I have to do in each of these presentations is point out that Americans generally have a lot of myths about our own history. We tend to be dark to ourselves, as Cecil Taylor, the jazz musician, puts it. That is why it's so easy for us to make mistakes in other people's culture and other people's nations, because we don't even know our own history. Let me read a quote for you from a self-proclaimed racist. Not that I'm looking to raise up racists, but think of Dr. King and think of what this man is saying. I am not now, nor ever have I been in favor of bringing about in any way the social, political, and economic equality of the black and white races. I am not now, nor have I ever been in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say in addition to this that there is a physical difference between the black and white races, which I believe will forever forbid the two races from living together on terms of social and political equality. And in so much as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, I, as much as any other man, am in favor of that superior position being assigned to the white race. Okay? Was that Strom Thurmond or George Wallace or Tom Metzger? No, that was Abraham Lincoln. Okay? But we have this almost Jesus-like characterization of Lincoln. Lincoln made himself clear. That was part of the 1858, September 18th, 1858, Charleston, Illinois, as part of the Lincoln-Douglas debates. He responded essentially to the charge that he was a nigger lover. Okay? And he made it plain. He opposed slavery, one, because he shouldn't treat a dog that way, but he did not favor democratic rights for the freed slaves, in his own words. But often we put words in the mouths of people and perpetuate myths, like Christopher Columbus discovered America. That's a myth that continues to be taught in schools from kindergarten on up. How can you discover a place that's already occupied and in use at the time? You see? That's just like playing off the Indians as they're shrubs or something. They were here and they've been here for thousands of years. But often history is written from a European point of view, a rich man's point of view, a male point of view, but not a point of view that is actually true. It's a mythological notion. Okay? If anything, if you've ever been on the beach, You can see a ship on the horizon before people on the horizon can see the folks on land. If anything, the Indians discovered Columbus. Plus, they were at home and he was lost. All right? And don't overlook the fact that most of the people Columbus met, either through execution or forced labor or disease, died. Okay? That's why the Native American allies and cousins of mine don't appreciate Columbus Day. They say, Uncle Lloyd, that's just like having Jews celebrate a Hitler Day. Columbus engaged in genocide. He did. And the history books don't want to let you know differently. I used to write for a brief time for Houghton Mifflin, which is a book publishing company. And I basically said what Columbus did, and I added that he was a drunken pirate. You know, he was more like a drunken pirate than a great explorer like with NASA or something. And the editor said, well, you know, Lloyd, that is true, and I know that to be true, but we have to sell these books in Texas. So we're not going to say that. So my line is, if it's an educational program, it has to be based around truth. I'm a political science instructor. If we're talking about a form of democracy, if we're talking about a form of patriotism, it has to be based on truth, not a lie, not a myth. Like the myth that the United States has the right, wisdom, and ability to run the entire world. That's a myth. People might feel that way, but that doesn't make it true. Hitler thought he could run the world too. Hitler said Jews were subhuman, so let's get rid of them. That didn't make it true, even if you have the power to do it. Might doesn't make right. The truth is the truth. Nobody has a corner on the truth. But the truth, I believe, will, in fact, set us free. An American hero said this. As long as machines, computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triple evils of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. And I don't want to let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman for the whole world. God has a way of standing before nations with judgment. It seems as though I can hear God saying to America, you're too arrogant. And if you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power and place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I am God. That was Dr. King. Those kind of speeches that he was given the last 3 or 4 years of his life are the speeches that got him killed. He went from back of the bus type issues and even voting rights issues to challenging the American economic system, not only in America but worldwide, and America's foreign policy too. Preaching to a mass-based audience, worldwide audience. His last campaign was a poor people's campaign. Not for black poor people or white poor people or Latino poor people or Chinese poor people, but for people. The working class, the bottom of the working class that is poor to this day. That other America, as Harrington called it. He was mobilizing those people. He became a threat to the people who run this country. See, I was in the state legislature. I know the elected officials don't run the country. I was a Missouri state rep. Missouri's not run by the House or the Senate. I was in it, I know. Missouri is run by banks, transnational agribusiness conglomerates, insurance companies, chemical companies. Okay? Now, some of us speak the interests of the working class, the people who voted for us, but some of the folks down there speak, most of them speak for these big companies. International drug dealers have more influence in Missouri than the House and the Senate. Why I say I'm talking about Anheuser-Busch. Oh yeah. They are a drug company. Alcohol is a drug. It is. That's why most of you in here are drug users. You think it's somebody else. No, but if you tipped a few on New Year's Eve, or if you're going to get approved to watch the game, you're using a drug. It suggests the problem is not drug use, but drug abuse. But drinking alcohol is not the same as alcoholism. From my point of view, drug abuse is a public health question. But we're full of myths about drugs and who uses drugs. That's why we say things like alcohol and drugs. That's like saying oranges and fruit. You know what I'm saying? But if we say alcohol and drugs, that lets us off the hook as a drug user and potential drug abuser and reckless driver and all the rest. I actually had the primary lobbyists for Anheuser-Busch in Jeff City trying to tell me that alcohol wasn't a drug, it's a beverage. Many of these politicians use those kind of semantic splitting of hairs to avoid the truth, which is that the two most used and abused drugs in America, two most deadly drugs in America, are both advertised: alcohol and nicotine. Can't be no war on drugs. Might be a war on low-level drug users, an emotional war. If you hooked on drugs, you got enough problems rather than being a suspect too. Might need treatment, not incarceration. And if incarceration and detainment is the solution for people who are addicted to crack or meth, why not lock up the alcoholics too? Help them. That would solve the unemployment problem for sure, because everybody be in a joint. See what I'm saying? We're hypocritical about a lot of this stuff. I'm talking about Dr. King, but part of what I'm talking about is what he'd be talking about if he had been able to live today. He would come out against charging children with adult felonies. When I was in the state legislature, they passed a law that made it legal for any prosecutor in Missouri to charge a child as young as 8 as an adult. People say, oh, they're rowdy, they need that, they do the crime, they need to do the time. Okay? But an 8-year-old can't own property. Why? Because the 8-year-old's a child. 8-year-old can't vote because the 8-year-old's a child. Can't get married, they're a child. That's why. But if they do something, we don't charge them as an adult. Hypocrites! We don't even stop and think about that. Oh, we set the alcohol level at 21. They don't need that. They aren't mature enough to handle that type of thing. But we can send them to Iraq and Afghanistan and come back, they can't even get a brew. Hypocritical! We want people to be how we want them to be so we can get them to do what we want them to do. Amen. See? King saw that stuff and talked about it when most people either didn't know or were, as many people are today, afraid. See, I'm the son of a teamster. My whole family is made up of soldiers, teamsters, firefighters, artists, and maids. Working class family. Proud to be from it. My grandfather, not my great-great-great-great-grandfather, my daddy's daddy was a slave. When my father was born in 1912, his father was 57. So my grandfather, my daddy's daddy, was a young boy, 9 or 10, when slavery ended. So I understand slavery, and I understand why it was illegal for slaves to learn to read and write. Because the people who ran America then and the people who run America now knew that a well-educated, articulate, and brave slave was a person who was not about to not be a slave any minute. My father used to tell me, get something that they can't take away from you. But you know, they can take your money, take your house, take your cars, take your clothes, take your friends, take your time. The only thing you can't get more of is time. If they decide you did it, sit up in the joint forever. If they decide they need to give you life, whether you did it or not. You see all the people using DNA evidence to get out of life sentences, and for that matter, the death penalty. If they decide you did it, they can take your life, but they can never come to you and take what you know, and that's why it's a pleasure to see all these folks who are in college and getting was something that you can always have. So I respect the fact that you are here. I'll try to give you something, and I'm trying now to give you something you can use. Some of us are fully prepared. I'd say probably having spoken to hundreds of groups like this, 1 out of 4 of you are fully prepared to be against people being held back because they're women, or people being held back because they are of color. I don't say a minority, I don't say non-white, because nobody is non-anything. You are what you are, not what you're not. If I had that attitude about gender and sex, sexual orientation, I would come in and say, well, good morning, gentlemen and non-gentlemen, you know. The gentlemen aren't the standard everybody has to be bounced off of. You are who you are, not who you're not. You're women, you're Latino, you're Asian American, you're whatever you are, not what you're not. The affirmation of who we are is part of that postmodern society. We all aren't the same, no need to pretend we are. And we shouldn't be so hateful, as people were with Dr. King, of those who challenge those contradictions and look for solutions to them. They have a holiday for Dr. King now, but see, I never marched with Dr. King, but I was around at the time. I was in the youth arm of the NAACP, and many people in the NAACP thought Dr. King was too radical. He did. Let alone the Klan and whatnot. He was a hated man. Loved by many, hated by most. When the Reuters news agency and the New York Tribune, which was a paper back then, did a survey in the South of people who had the right to vote, this was in the 50s, while King was doing the Montgomery bus boycott and whatnot, 75% of white folks who had the right to vote, they were the only ones who had the right to vote. Latinos did not have the right to vote, etc. Blacks didn't. 70% of those who had the right to vote said that it was their right to decide who had the right to vote and who didn't, and so they didn't want blacks to vote, so they said this is bad and King is bad. King is probably a communist, trying to change America and cause trouble. It did cause trouble, especially among people who were comfortable with that kind of South African-like apartheid in America. But those whites, blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, who knew America had to change, identified with Dr. King, marched with him, risked their lives. People of different nationalities. The masses of folks who walked with King and worked with King were black people. But there are many people who not only marched with King, but got killed behind it, like Swerner, Cheney, and Goodman. Okay? These are college students like yourself who went down south to see to it that all Americans could vote and got murdered by armed thugs. Most of them associated with the Klan, but others are just glad to hurt some white folks who they saw as nigger lovers. Okay? King was hated then, he's popular now. But the problem is a lot of folks are unprepared to stand up today and say the kinds of things today that King said then. See, the test of a true intellectual and a true leader and a true thinker is to be prepared to say what folks don't want to hear, even though you know it's true, not when it's popular and acceptable. There's a bunch of people my age who I see every year, and I quit going, at these King events, rocking back and forth singing We Shall Overcome, but when King was alive, they didn't bust a grape because they were afraid. Thought they might lose $1, might lose a job, might lose relatives, etc. My girlfriend don't like, because she don't like no radical stuff. Afraid to be men and women. Some of us are like that now. They're afraid to stand up and say, from my point of view, George Bush is a dimwit. He's slow. In way over his head. I just say, let's face it. We invaded Iraq, but they didn't have any weapons of mass destruction, which the UN said in the first place. 100,000 Iraqis dead, over 3,000 Americans dead. We invaded Iraq because they had a lot to do with 9/11. That was a part of their plot. No, that's untrue. They knew it was untrue when they told you, but they knew you didn't know, so they could tell you anything. Bin Laden and them, they talked about Saddam Hussein. They called him a secularist and a renegade and running dog and a bunch of other stuff. They were never Saddam Hussein supporters. Saddam Hussein is a Muslim, but he's a secularist. The Ba'ath Party that he belongs to, that you can find in Jordan and Syria, etc., they are not fundamentalist Muslims. They are Muslims, but they're not driven by their desire to make everybody Muslim. They're secular, like Gaddafi and them. Like most Muslims, in fact. Most Muslims are not fundamentalists or what most Muslims call political Muslims. Okay? Just like there are all kinds of different Muslims, there's all different kinds of Christians, all different kinds of everything. See, all Christians are not right-wing, God told me to kill Chavez types like Pat Robertson. You got the right-wing Christians, you got left-wing Christians like Jesse. You can't tell. Jews are not a race. They're an ethnic group. If you say there's a Christian standing outside, you don't know what that Christian looks like. If you say there's a Jew standing outside, mythology in your mind might make you think it looks like somebody from Eastern Europe. That's our stereotype of what Jews look like. But there are people in Eastern Europe who look like that and not Jewish. There are Jews in Ethiopia. Who do they look like? The rest of the Ethiopians and Somalis. But they're Jewish. Judaism is a religion, not a race. It's an ethnic group because they have a common religion. But there's no way to look Jewish. That's the basis of that joke. Funny you don't look Jewish. That's like saying funny you don't look Christian, because there's no way to look Christian. But I'm saying we're full of all these myths and misunderstandings about who we are, so in turn we have a lot of misunderstanding about who everybody else is too. And we're prepared to blow them up if necessary. The third reason we went to war in Iraq, and the illegal war, okay, an unconstitutional war, just like the spy program they have on anybody they suspect as a troublemaker or possible somebody thinking outside the box. Iraq did not go to Niger to get nuclear component parts so they could create a bomb. The CIA even went. The former head of the process in Iraq, the military process in Iraq, went, found out that was not true, and came back and told people, told the president, told Rumsfeld, told Cheney, went on TV. That's why they went after his wife, who was an undercover CIA agent, to blackmail her, to keep him from telling the truth what he found. See, again, I say a foreign policy based on lies is not one I want my tax dollar to support.
Amen.
If we needed to invade Iraq, I'm not a pacifist, but see, I don't want to jump on other countries because they got something I want, whether it be oil, land, or their dignity. My grandmother used to tell me, taking what belongs to somebody else does not make it yours, it just makes it stolen. So my line is, I'm a patriot, but I'm a patriot based upon an honest and true analysis of the facts. Any patriotism wrapped around lies is a false patriotism. Dr. King talked about our relationship with the landed gentry of Latin America and with the apartheid regime. Check his speeches. His best speech to me is the speech he gave just before he died. One was the one he gave the night in Memphis, but there's another one that he was given that whole year. You know, when you speak every day, you got a stock speech. You don't create something new every single day because it's virtually impossible. But his stock speech won a Grammy after he was murdered. It's called Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. This came out when people were either didn't know what was happening in Vietnam, supported it, or even thought it was good to kill the Vietnamese since they didn't worry about dying anyway because they didn't feel pain the way we did. I was told that in grade school. Whitney Reader told me that. But Dr. King came out and said, they people too. They wish their mama that she gets blown up just like you would. He humanized the so-called enemy. See, a lot of us figured that we won in Vietnam because we killed 2 million Vietnamese and we, quote, only lost 65,000 people. But see, in the modern world, the postmodern world, military conflict is political primarily, body count secondary. We killed 2 million Vietnamese, but the people we fought, they are currently the government of Vietnam. The capital of the city we backed, the region we backed, was Saigon. Now it's Ho Chi Minh City. We killed 2 million people and lost the war. See, the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people were not won over. Lyndon Johnson and Bill Moyers, who actually wrote that, understood that. That's what modern warfare is about. If you don't convince the enemy, so-called enemy, that your way is better, even if you kill all but a few, you've lost. Some of you have been victims of violence here in Kansas City. Some of you have had to see your relatives and friends at funeral homes, churches. The people who killed your relatives, your friends, your associates, because they killed them, that doesn't bring you closer to them. That's somebody you really don't like for life. How many guerrillas, how many terrorists, how many freedom fighters, whatever point of view you have, do we create when we kill civilians in Iraq? Dr. King used to say, the government doesn't want me to tell you this, but God told me to tell you. I'm telling you the same thing. My job is to speak truth to power and let the chips fall where they may. I've been doing this for decades. I'm still around, and I think that's one of the reasons I'm still around, because when I open my mouth, I'm speaking truth, even if it's unpopular. We talk all this stuff about democracy and fair vote and one man, one vote, but the current administration in the White House, yes, I must say it, stole 2 presidential elections through the suppression of the black vote. First in Florida in 2000 and in Ohio in 2004. This is the basis of the United States determination whether a country is democratic or not. When Nigerian military elite stole the government twice in a row, we declared them an undemocratic nation and put sanctions on them. But in a monopolar world, one nation basically dominating everything, who's going to put sanctions on the United States? Don't think just because America does it, it must be okay. Don't think just because a Latino does it, just because an Arab does it, just because a white person does it. Don't think that makes it right. Right is right, wrong is wrong, no matter who's doing it. Other people have a right to run their own country, too. We would be offended if we found out China or Germany or Russia or somebody was paying people in elections here to run. And that's what we do in other countries. And when the side we don't want to win is voted in by the people, we'll overthrow the government, as we did in Haiti a couple of years ago. An elected government, as we did in Chile in 1973. We overthrew people who were elected. If democracy means that much, we would step back and let people have their own government. Kissinger at the time said with Chile, sometimes people don't know what's in their best interest. Who died and made him daddy? That's the same way we think now. Hugo Chavez in Venezuela has all radical philosophy, aligns with whoever he wants to be as if he were a free man or something. We'll try to overthrow him twice and might do it. This is the guy Pat Robertson was calling for the assassination of him. Now, that's a real Christian. See, I came up in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the first church founded in the United States by black people in the 1700s, colonial time. I came up with Jesus, read the Bible cover to cover, was in Sunday school, vacation Bible school, the choir, the missionary association, usher boy. I was in there. I don't go to church a lot anymore, but I was in church most days of the week from the time I was a kid to the time I was a teenager. Know what Jesus said. He ain't said nothing about bomb your enemies. He said love your enemies. So it hurts me to see Jesus all twisted up in a war of aggression in the Middle East. Jesus was, that I know, was a man on the side of the poor and oppressed. He came to free people's minds, not to jump on people and take what they got. Whether it's up the street, somebody busting in somebody's house to take their VCR, or shooting somebody in the head because they want the SUV, or jumping on somebody in another country with F-14s because you want that oil, or that cocoa, or whatever it is you might want. This is wrong. I know a gangster when I see one. I grew up on 44th and Benton. Just because you got a nice suit on, a white collar, don't keep you from being a gangster. Manicured nails, all gangsters got them. In terms of invading Iraq, Richard Clark, who was security chief under the Bush administration when he was elected, he said, I heard him when he was spoke over at the hotel on 45th and Main, and I saw it in his book, that 2 weeks into the administration, Rumsfeld, Cheney, Bush, Rice, Powell, etc., sat in the Situation Room planning to invade Iraq. Long before September 11th. But because the less you know, the more you can easily be manipulated and bamboozled and hoodwinked, as Malcolm used to like to say. And they know you don't know. So as soon as 9/11 came, they said Saddam Hussein did it. The same people who attacked New York and D.C., they were after Saddam Hussein, working against him, trying to subvert his government because it wasn't Islamic enough. But of course, once we invaded, they came together, so the United States did something that no Iraqi government recently has been able to do, bring everybody together, largely to fight us, okay? The point I'm making is just like with a family dispute, the police comes to respond to the abuse charge or whatever. They come in, put a headlock on the mom and start pounding her with a nightstick, throw her down. Everybody in the house is fighting the police now. People forget who even called or what they called for. The whole struggle has changed. It's the Johnsons against the police. It was Charlie Jean against Mama. Okay? I'm saying humans are humans all over the world. That's what I found having an opportunity to travel. People react like that. If you blow somebody's family up, they ain't on your side after that. Never. Hope to die against you. When I told people back over a year ago that they were torturing people in Iraq, people who, super patriot, don't confuse me with the facts because my mind is already made up, said, you're a liar, that's propaganda, that's nothing but Muslim propaganda. You shouldn't say things like that. Of course, when the pictures came out, they shut up. I knew because I saw the truth. I didn't seek whatever CNN said last. I know from my research that military intelligence, psychological operations units work at CNN to manage the news. They admitted what's going on from like 90 to 97, but they said, well, we don't do that anymore. I had no reason to believe them. They lost credibility with me, as has George Bush. George Bush is not the law, he's the president. The law is the Constitution. No one is above the law. If what George Bush is doing is unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional no matter who he is. Nixon thought he was above the law too. He broke into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to get something they could blackmail him on so Ellsberg would stop telling the truth about bombing civilians on purpose in Vietnam. But that got Nixon in trouble, was about to get impeached, but before he could get impeached, he also running a secret war in Cambodia. That's what he was doing. The Congress had said don't do. But before he could get impeached, he quit. Clinton got impeached for lying about sex with a White House worker. What should the consequence be for starting an illegal and unnecessary war? For diverting money from the levees in New Orleans and the public schools to buy bombs. Money for bombs, money not for old people's medication. To me, that hurts me and the people I know much more than Clinton's illicit sex. Yes, I suggest that because of these crimes committed, Bush should be charged with high crimes and misdemeanors. I believe that. But just briefly, before I go to questions, I want to give you a chance to ask questions and make comments too. In Brazil, with Lula, and in Venezuela with Chavez, and in Bolivia with Morales, the first Native American leader to be elected president of a Latin American country, things are changing in the world. But as Dr. King said many times, America that kicked off the most radical revolution of the modern world, the American Revolution against British colonialism, that this revolutionary nation has become the arch anti-revolutionary nation. Because they benefit from the status quo, this unfair relationship between big, super rich corporations and small developing countries that mainly rely on raw materials. This is an unfair relationship. But if you challenge it, people will look at you in a negative way because, well, that's not America. You're not pro-American enough. Okay? I'm pro-American. Most of my people, if you understand when we got here, were here long before most Americans' families were. I'm as American as anybody. But if you think I'm not American if I don't believe a right-wing politician like George Bush, you wrong. I'm as American as anybody. I've been here, my family's been here. And I speak an honest patriotism that is in the interest of people who work for a living, who truly outnumber those who own for a living. Sometimes, though, we don't understand what class we're in. All we want to do is get ours. And damn them Arabs, damn them Negroes, damn them white people, just give me mine. That's what they say. That's selfish and individualistic and materialistic. That's what we need to struggle against. Not people who want to run their own country. They got a right just like we got a right. If they don't have a right, they should be trying to overthrow us. We think we got attacked on September 11th because they're crazy and just hateful. Sometimes things happen that make you want to hate somebody. Like folks come from another country, assuming that with weapons they can run you and determine whether or not you have the right choice for president. Dr. King, a few things to remember about him. I mean, I build him up, but we also must let him be a man too. People forget that he evolved himself and did not lead. He led, but he did not create the Montgomery bus boycott. Basic assumption there. Everybody knows he created this bus boycott, gave a great speech, and folks got, right to vote and all that. He created a movement. He became a leader of a movement, nationwide and in many ways worldwide movement that brought about the right to vote, and the right to public accommodation, the right to ride a bus or go to a restaurant. He led that, but he didn't make it. Even the bus boycott. That bus boycott was created by people like E.D. Nixon, who was a Pullman porter. He used to have trains that ran on the road, on the tracks. They were like rolling hotels. They had the first black union. Those Pullman porter union people like E.D. Nixon, who lived in Montgomery, created that bus boycott. Rosa Parks and whatnot. Rosa Parks sat at E.D. Nixon's kitchen table and said, we could use this to challenge segregation all across the South. If you want to see that interview, get the video, Miles of Smiles and Years of Struggle, about the Pullman Porters Union. Miles of Smiles and Years of Struggle. But E.D. Nixon tells a tale about how King came to town. And they were looking for somebody to lead the bus boycott movement. You know about the bus boycott movement, right? Colored people, didn't call colored people, couldn't sit when they wanted to. So what they did was boycott the buses. And the bus company had a choice between letting everybody ride where they wanted to or going out of business. And so they chose to stay in business. They did understand money. They didn't understand fairness, but they understood money. But the bus boycott was already going on and being planned while King wasn't even in it. He was from Atlanta, and it came out that Nixon said, this is E.D. Nixon, Pullman porter, not Richard, that there was bickering among the various preachers and political factions and unions in Montgomery. And so they said King, who was young, 26 years old, see, he wasn't the old man, you know, I have a dream, an older man. He wasn't that old even when he got killed, but he was in his 20s. He led the Montgomery bus boycott. So some of you think you're too young, or you know, you're not. You might not be brave enough, or you might not know enough yet, but you're not too young. Okay, the student sit-in movement that sat in the lunch counters and whatnot, they were college freshmen and high school seniors. They were young and immature, but they had a vision of a different life, different world. That vision can drive you if you let it. Not only in your own life, but I'm talking about overall. A lot of people got a defeatist attitude. They think, well, can't nothing be done no way. But see, I've been around long enough to see, I've seen night change today. There was a time when I couldn't even go to school in this campus, let alone lecture. Things have changed to a certain extent. Not enough, but I know things change because I've lived those changes. When I was coming up in grade school, there was one day out of the year you could go to what was called Fairyland, and it was like Worlds of Fun is now. There was no Worlds of Fun back then. There was only Fairyland. Colored kids, Latino kids, couldn't go but one day out of the year. They called it Picnic Day. Okay? We called it Nigga Day. And it was a sign of your family's understanding, whether you were black or Latino, that if you can't go every day, you're not going to go that one day. So half the kids would go, the other half would sit there proud that we giving up Worlds of Fun because, you know, Dr. King and them said so. We're gonna boycott them until they understand. There were department stores in Kansas City, like Emory Bird Fair, where you could buy clothes, but if you tried them on, you had to buy them because who would want to wear clothes after a Negro? That was in Kansas City, downtown, when I was a kid. Not 400 years ago, I'm talking about when I was coming up, which some of you think of as 400 years ago, but it ain't that long ago. You could eat at the counter in Macy's or Emory Bird Fair or Woolworth. But if you ordered your food, you had to take it outside and you couldn't sit down. Here in Kansas City, not Selma, Alabama. So things have changed some. Things like that have changed dramatically. But the economic questions and cultural questions and job questions and small business questions, that has not been resolved. The point is, the masses of folks made that movement in Montgomery that made King an international celebrity. E.D. Nixon, the real leader of the movement, called Dr. King and said, you know, Dr. King, he told him, quote, you know, these preachers are arguing here. And you a young hot potato, as we said, from Atlanta. Why don't you lead the movement? And Dr. King said, well, I don't know, Brother Nixon, you know, I'm not from here and people might get jealous, feel like I'm trying to steal the show or something. He said, well, just call me back, Brother Nixon, I'll let you know. Call me back Friday. Okay, so he called him back. He said, what you want to do, Dr. King? He said, you know, Brother Nixon, I think I'll take on the challenge. He said, well, that's good, Dr. King, because, you know, we having a meeting, already scheduled a meeting at your church, and it looks sort of bad, you know, everybody there and you not there. My point is, Dr. King got drafted by the people who were already rolling, and he rose to the occasion and became a great leader from that, not just in Montgomery, but in D.C. and on. Most of you have been freeze-frozen with his I Have a Dream speech, which was a great speech. But his other speeches after that included stuff other than ethnic relations and whatnot. He talked about America's economic system, America's foreign policy, etc. Many people feel that's what got him killed. So I'm saying, look at the later speeches. 63 was I Have a Dream. He got killed in 68. He gave a bunch of speeches that were much more deep, broad, and radical. So radical, I believe he was murdered. I believe he was murdered by the FBI. Why? Because, in my few minutes left, I have a document obtained through the Freedom of Information Act that is written 1 month to the day before Dr. King was killed. It came from the desk of J. Edgar Hoover, who was then head of the FBI, calling for his murder. Smoking gun evidence. And people say, well, that's just circumstantial. Most of the people I know who are in jail for circumstantial evidence. Like if I threaten this brother right here, and you see me threaten him, and he ends up dead, now I say, you should be killed because we got enough Arabs over here now, and we're going to kill, you know. And then a letter come up where I say, you know, that he should be killed. It'd be hard for me to stay out of the penitentiary, even if I didn't do it. Smoking gun evidence. FBI's then, for your eyes only, secret memo disclosed through Congress. Congressman Wheat got me this document through what is called the Freedom of Information Act, where you can sue and get documents about yourself or any subject that the government might be holding that they don't necessarily want you to see. So we can say the FBI was complicitous in King's murder. And I also have a document that fills in those blacked out spaces where they took out agents' names and names of the people who are also targets and potential heroes, potential, in the FBI's words, potential messiahs who could unify and electrify the black and human rights movement. He was murdered for that reason. Dr. King went in, this is the last point I want to make, but I have much more to tell you. I'm trying to tell you 2 or 3 semesters in about an hour. It caused trouble in many people's minds. He'd go in little dusty towns where everybody thought everything was okay, rich folks ran it, every nigga had a place and every nigga was in his place, that kind of thing, and go and just cause holy confusion. Had to bring the dogs out and stuff to make these people stop protesting. He didn't want everybody just to come together to see we all have navels and a history and a culture and we all sing Kumbaya and go home. He wanted people of different races and classes and ethnic groups and religions to come together to change America and make it more what it says it's supposed to be, even if it don't want to. Even if people don't want to hear that everybody should have the right to vote. That like my uncle and et cetera went to, and brothers went to Korea and Vietnam and came back, couldn't even vote. My uncle fought in World War II, Battle of the Bulge, came back. They didn't want to let him ride the bus with the white soldiers to come back to Kansas City. When they got to Baltimore and disembarked, the Navy band played Bye Bye Blackbirds. And he came back not able to vote, not able to ride the damn bus where he wanted to. King challenged that kind of hypocrisy, and people hated it because of it, because people were comfortable. People said if he'd go into a state that he wasn't even from and organize people so that everybody could have the right to vote no matter what your race or ethnicity, they said he was interfering with their rights. States' rights, that's what they say. Sometimes your rights are not fair. Having undue privilege is not fair. If being unfair is the basis of your citizenship, you got a false citizenship. You're entitled to the same thing everybody else is entitled to. Okay? But my point is this. If Dr. King was the okey-doke, let's just everybody get along type, the way the media, the way the news, the way most schools portray him, he'd be alive giving us okey-doke advice today. Don't you see? Dr. King wanted people to come together to change America and make it more just. Let America live up to its dream. He didn't want just everybody to get along. That was Rodney King, not Dr. King. He was a troublemaker for justice. And that's why we remember him. Because he was not just articulate and brilliant and committed. He was a brave man. Gave his life for justice for everybody, not just in America, around the world. The man should be remembered. And every January comes around, we talk about it. We should tell people, our relatives, our friends, our colleagues, fellow students, who he really was, so we can stop the second assassination of Dr. King. Most of you, if you had been on that balcony in Memphis in '68, April 4th, and you knew that shot was coming, you'd have pushed him out of the way. Even if it meant you getting shot. Most of you would have done that because most people are compassionate. But you weren't on the balcony. I wasn't either. But you're on the balcony now. The time to be brave is not when everything's over. The time to be brave is when truth is on the scaffold and wrong on the throne. See what I'm saying? Nice. When it's dangerous to be brave, that's a real soldier. But if you're not prepared to be brave and fight for your rights as a citizen, whatever your nationality and ethnicity, you will deserve what you get. Yes, we have a chance to make the nation more democratic, less like a police state, to challenge their right to watch us at every turn like we're in Hungary or something, 1950s Poland or something. It's not their government, it's our government. We built the nation, not the super rich. We've come for nothing that is not ours. Our fair share, no matter who we are, and democracy for all. I'd like to suggest, too, that if you want to keep up with this notion, either on your website, email, internet, on your computer, look at an organization or a program called Democracy Now! Democracy Now! It's the best news outlet that I know of in America. It comes on every day on the radio, and it comes on constantly, 24 hours a day on the internet. Log on at democracynow.org. And you'll get daily reports on what's really happening here and around the world. Amy Goodman, a great journalist, and 40 or 50 other stringers who are all over the world, they put that together every morning. And if you don't have access to the internet, which you should as a student, it comes on KKFI radio, 90.1 FM, KKFI radio, every Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Democracy Now! If you check it, just check it once and you'll see what I'm talking about. What CNN is saying, all this smokescreen propaganda stuff, Democracy Now! Cuts through that. When they were overthrowing Aristide's elected government in Haiti, the president of Haiti, the United States engineered a coup. They planned in the Dominican Republic, overthrew the Haitian government, and took him out of the country, even though he'd been elected by 70% of the population. The United States was saying that he had fled the country of his own volition and whatnot. Democracy Now! In fact, Amy Goodman was on the plane with him, interviewing him, how he said, "I'm being kidnapped." And that's why a lot of people don't like Democracy Now! Because they tell the truth. The State Department, President, wanted people to believe that Aristide just gave up, he was corrupt, and no, he got kidnapped, he was not corrupt, and he was a popular man. But now there's a military dictatorship in Haiti that is protecting the United States business interests, and that's okay. We're supporting that. Death squads in Haiti like there were in El Salvador in the 80s. Now, as we speak, people getting killed. Priest named Jean Jus, who would have been elected president in the next elections, he's in jail. He didn't do anything, but he's in jail, so he can't run. They said, we can't run if you're in jail. So that kind of undemocratic stuff is going on in our name with our tax dollars. And we need to speak out against that, vote against people who support that, vote for people who do. That's the least we can do. Thank you for your time. The point I want to make is if you really love and respect what Dr. King did and respected his bravery, don't just think that. Do something today that might be in those same kind of footsteps. We'll do the same thing because these are different issues. But don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to challenge injustice. Don't be afraid of what others might say. If King had been that way, some of us still might not be voting or working in places like this. Questions and comments? Yes?
You spoke a majority of the time about your anti-Bush administration views. So I wanted to ask you specifically about the war in Iraq. You said there was an illegal war. I think a lot of people take the easy route and just complain about the war, but I want to know your opinion because of your research and investigations, what your opinion would be is our best exit strategy.
Thank you. That is fundamentally different than the questions most students asked me a year ago. When they told them it was going to be a quick operation, just go in and mop up and everybody's on our side. There are still 250,000 American flags sitting up in a warehouse in Iraq that the Iraqis were supposed to wave when Americans rolled in, okay? Because they had made them, right? My suggestion would be to make a commitment to the world, a public announcement saying, and they wouldn't say this, but what they could say, we had a misperception. We apologize for all these civilians that have been killed. We're going to take our troops out so the Iraqi people can decide without foreign occupation as to who they want to run their country. We will help repair the damage we've done, billions of dollars. We will not profiteer from those repairs. Halliburton and whatnot, companies that have been convicted of fraud and other crimes will not participate. We'll use other American companies who haven't committed crimes on their own. After having apologized to the Iraqi people, we will then go to the Security Council that we are on in the UN and form a United Nations force primarily populated by nations, people from the region, but also others from around the world. We will then orderly pull out and let the UN supervise the nation until they elect their own government, and then we'll have to accept that we might want to run other people's countries, but wars of aggression are illegal, and we don't want to do illegal things. We want to be a friend of the world. We want to have cooperative and peaceful relations. We don't want to be the neighborhood bully. We want to be another nation that is strong and powerful and just, and be known for that, not by the intelligence of our weaponry. That would be a brave president. He wouldn't win re-election because Americans are so sick and blind and so filled with hatred for people we don't know and fear of the unknown. But it would be the thing I would do. And of course, right after I said it, I would duck. As Jack Kennedy should have. We need to look into who killed Jack Kennedy, President Kennedy. Oliver Stone ain't all wrong. If you've ever seen the movie JFK. Kennedy got killed for similar reasons. He had said privately he was going to get out of Vietnam. He came in and busted Bonanza, and came in the middle of Bonanza and criticized white racists in Alabama, Birmingham, for bombing a church while kids were praying. People didn't want to hear that. People hated King. He came in and interrupted the most popular show on TV to talk about why America was wrong and so hateful. He said, if we can get along with the Russians, why can't we get along with our own colored brothers and sisters? He also refused to follow through on his word with the Bay of Pigs invasion. You know, he knew about the Bay of Pigs invasion, and American reporters wrote that it didn't happen, including Carl Rowan. But of course, when they got in there, he had told them that when they invaded Cuba to overthrow Castro, this was largely the rich Cubans who had lost banks and casinos and whatnot, and mafioso who had lost stuff. Then Havana was like Vegas is now. When Castro and them took over, the mafia and others had significant problems with that. They went back to get their stuff. The big landowners, people from United Fruit then later became Sunkist. And they thought, again, misjudging history, misjudging people, that when they hit the beach with the CIA and these exiles and stuff, that the people just rise up and see this opportunity to overthrow Castro and just jump on their side and everything, they just overthrow the government. The opposite happened, of course. A lot of people who had gotten free health care, free education and whatnot in the early days of the revolution fought them, pinned them down on the beach. Hundreds and hundreds of people got arrested, CIA types. But at a rally in Miami, I have video of the rally too, Kennedy had said that if they get in trouble, that it was a heroic struggle, if they got in trouble in Cuba, he would bomb Cuba. But of course, by the time they realized when they hit the beach that it was a rout, and had been taken up in homes and hotels and stuff all through Havana, Kennedy said, well, I just can't bomb everybody, you know, and hung up. Many of those people who were in the Bay of Pigs were also implicated in the assassination of Kennedy. So I argue the FBI, those anti-Castro Cubans, and those elements of the CIA who had participated, particularly in the Bay of Pigs, that coalition, that clique, that cult, killed Jack Kennedy. Dick Gregory told me that in 1973, but I just couldn't believe it. It just seemed unlikely because I didn't actually know the true nature and character of the ruling class that runs this country. I'm not talking about the American people. Most American people don't know what's up. But the folks in the elite, no. I don't have time to read a hip-hop poem, but there's a line in the poem I wrote about conscious hip-hoppers that has a phrase in it that says, what's up, Bush? Hi. What's up, Cheney? Hi. What's up, Rice? Hi. What's up, gangsters? Okay? I wish I had time to read that. No. All right.